for the great Shawn Michaels, who's been brilliant here tonight. But he's caught, and Cena wins.
Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on those notifications. And once you're done, leave a comment down below and I just might end up responding. The Montreal Screwjob. I'm just going to say those obvious words now so no one asks in the comments. There's plenty of ego floating around backstage in Vince's WWE, so it should come as a surprise to none that there's been more than a few instances of wrestlers refusing to do the job. If you think we missed something, go check out our other video on wrestlers refusing to lose. Wow! That sounded like a Watch Mojo bit. I'm D-Wicked from Watch WWE, and here's 10 more wrestlers who refused to lose. Number 10, Chyna. Well, pretty much everyone Chyna was ever associated with in WWE, Triple H, Shawn Michaels, Vince McMahon, are known for their backstage nonsense and massive egos. Chyna usually didn't seem to have issues with people while still a part of the company. And, you know, fair to her, why would the most dominantly booked woman of all ever have problems with the company? Well, after years of beating up the best boys they had, Chyna was asked to move over to the women's division to establish some credibility. She initially saw this as a step down, but was a little more lenient to the idea when she won the women's title in her debut women's division match in a total squash, taking the belt off Ivory. The idea was for her to quickly drop the belt to Lita though, which Chyna resented and never ended up getting to do. This one, we're not 100% sure on. It might have eventually happened, but we never got to find out, seeing as Chyna found out about her cheating boyfriend the same month and suspiciously found herself out of a job not too long after.
Oh, look out here. Powerbomb. Trying to just drill Lita with a powerbomb, and that'll do it.
Number 9, Johnny Cena. Surprise, surprise, big match finds his way onto yet another one of these lists, but let's hang on for just a second because believe it or not, this was actually a positive. Going into SummerSlam 2013, the month before or so, plans had been for Cena to defeat Daniel Bryan in the main event, only for Randy Orton to come out, do his cash-in, but Super Cena would power up out and actually be able to go at least another 10-ish, 15-minute match, eventually losing to a pair of RKOs. Cena resented this idea, saying that 1, Daniel Bryan deserved far better than that, and 2, people really don't want to see Orton vs. Cena for the title again, and wow, he could not have been possibly more right on either of those fronts. Number 8, Sable. Of all the backstage egos, Sable might have had the sexiest, but according to many from the locker room at the time, she also had one of the biggest. Sable jumped into WWF with her wrestling husband Mark Marrow and set the world on fire, literally blazing arenas down with her great looks, expressive facials, and, of course, puppies! Thanks, Jerry. She might have sucked in the ring, but her model aesthetic shot her straight into the top of the card, and by 1999 Royal Rumble, she was refusing to do the job to Luna Vachon, vacant. I don't know. From what I've heard, far superior in-ring worker who unfortunately never got her dues due to the bimbo atop the mountain.
Look at that. They're whipping it high. Luna's torn Sable's blouse, and Goldust is getting Luna the hell out of here.
Number 7, Eddie Guerrero. If you saw that first refuse to lose matches, you might remember me including one entry on that list that was the exact opposite. Randy Orton outright refusing to beat the Undertaker's streak. And so for this entry, we're going to do the same thing. Eddie Guerrero became WWE champion early on in 2004 and retained that title through WrestleMania 20, but to the surprise of many, Guerrero never really wanted to be the man in WWE. Becky would be quite disappointed. Eddie cited the pressure of being on top as one of the main reasons he outright refused beating JBL in their bloody title match, and when WWE decided to make that pay-per-view end in a DQ, Eddie got his wish at the next one, dropping the top belt to the former Bradshaw.
That main event might have never happened if it hadn't been for Eddie Guerrero. You see, a lot of people, a lot of fans believe that I wasn't capable of being a main event wrestler.
Number 6, Brock Lesnar. Not surprising to many, but in a way sort of shocking to me, as over the last few years, Lesnar's respect for the business has become more apparent than it ever has before, to the point where I'd actually bet the real Lesnar probably has some sympathy for poor old Kofi Kingston, the same man he once handpicked to fight at WWE Beast in the East. Well, someone who didn't mesh well with Brock was Dean Puppy Master Ambrose, who was reportedly set to get a massive push going into 2016. And I mean, it looked like it. Dean was the runner-up in the Royal Rumble before nearly taking the title off Triple H just before WrestleMania, and the initial plan was for the Lesnar match to help cement Ambrose as credible again before turning him heel and giving Reigns a proper opponent. Now, obviously, this would not have worked, as people would have resented Reigns even more, cheering a vicious heel Ambrose over 2016 Roman any day. But we never got to see the step in Roman's plan fail, because Brock disliked Dean's attitude so much that he refused to work with him and create a solid match. Okay, Dean obviously wasn't going to win this one, ever, but seeing as he played an essential role in slowing down Dean's momentum and turning a hell of a potential match into a snooze fest, it's going to make the list.
Lesnar with the win.
Number 5, the Fabulous Moolah. Alright, I gotta admit that I was lying a bit earlier when I said Chyna was the most dominantly booked woman in all of ever. 1, because all of ever probably isn't a thing, and 2, because clearly I forgot about the Fabulous Moolah. Now, I haven't seen much of her work, but I sure as hell do read about her behind the scenes business, and it's downright horrifying. From the stranglehold she so dominantly held over the women's wrestling entirety for decades, and the sexual exploits she put her trainees through, WWE deserved the backlash they got when they tried to name the WrestleMania Women's Battle Royal in her honor. Like aforementioned, she refused to play second fiddle to anyone, no matter how big a name or star on the rise they might have been. She didn't just refuse to lose to 1 or 2 or 10 wrestlers, she refused to lose for like 4 decades.
In front of a capacity crowd. 1, 2.
Number 4, the Honky Tonk Man. The Elvis impersonator knew exactly what he was when he stumbled upon the Intercontinental Championship after Rick Rude was unable to compete for the title against Ricky Steamboat, and Vince chose him to take the belt off Steamboat. He was literally just an Elvis impersonator. That was the whole gimmick, but with the Intercontinental title, he could establish some credibility. Of course, he has one of the dodgiest, cheat-infested reigns in the history of the belt, but Honky was a smart man and knew that without the belt, he'd be nothing, and considering that iconic reign is the one thing he's known for, clearly the man was right, so it's no surprise he outright refused to let Randy Savage take the belt off him in 1988 and ended up breaking the record for the longest IC title reign in WWE history.
Look at the look on his face. Honky Tonk Man with a guitar. Where's Bucket? Oh!
Number 3, Shawn Michaels. Sometimes wrestlers refuse all the way until the last minute, and when they can't get Vince to change his mind, they just all over the match. Shawn, kinda infamous for this. See Hulk Hogan at SummerSlam 2005. But surprisingly, he didn't give John Cena the same treatment at WrestleMania 23 despite having massive issues with John at the time. Seeing as Shawn was still in the prime of his career and John was still just as bad in the ring as he had been since his debut 5 years ago, Shawn understandably wanted to take the title off Cena and give the fans a champion worth watching. Yet, Vince refused, and Shawn ended up ribbing by tossing in lines during the match like, "Oh, I've got a job to do."
Well, the great Shawn Michaels, who's been brilliant here tonight. And he's caught, and Cena wins.
Number 2, The Rock. Despite being one of the all-time great WWE heels and having perhaps the biggest ego of all time on screen, it's pretty well known just how cool of a dude Dwayne Johnson actually is. Even big legendary names like Austin and Taker had gotten to some sort of backstage politics, but Rocky, he only ever seemed to be a victim to the phenomenon early on and never got into it once his real career kicked off. The one time he got into it backstage was actually with Shawn Michaels, who he didn't just refuse to lose to, he flat out refused to even work with, citing Michaels having insulted his family heritage and Rock seeing him as a disrespectful. And you know, that's fair enough. It was kinda HBK's thing back in the day, but unfortunately because of that, we never got to see one of the big dream matches of the Attitude Era. Well, maybe Saudi will change that for us one day. By God, that actually doesn't sound like the worst matchup they could request in 2020, does it? Sure as hell beats Heidenreich versus Michael Cole. Let's move on.
Oh, this is it. To be the man, woo, you gotta beat. No, wait, that's not it. That's not it.
And number 1, Shawn Michaels. And to complete the trio of Shawn Michaels slowly ramping up his Polish tendencies, we land at by far one of the most egregious acts ever committed by one of the greatest to ever lace him up. And this time, Oh, he's actually refusing to lose, alright, just minutes before the main event of One Night Only 1997, the first ever UK pay-per-view. Shawn was scheduled to lose to the British Bulldog, obviously a hometown hero who was probably the most over person in the building that night. Shawn pulled his Vince strings though and managed to reverse the decision so that he could beat the British Bulldog in the main event, a match in the first ever UK pay-per-view in his hometown that was for Bulldog's European Championship, and a match that, since Bulldog thought he was winning, he had dedicated to his sister, who he just found out was dying from cancer. Shawn, you're a f***ing asshole.
Brett Nolan! Shawn Michaels driving the chair into the knee. It's the perro no vuelve a ladrar más.
And those are 10 more wrestlers who refuse to lose. What are your thoughts on the videos? Grab the channel notifications, then bell.